She pleaded, "Take it off, what happened next will transform your view on love and sacrifice." The storm raged outside, but inside her tiny apartment, Claire sat on the edge of the couch, drenched in exhaustion after a 12-hour shift at the hospital. The familiar trait of nurturing souls left her hollow, a jigsaw of fragmented dreams pushing against her resolve. And then, the insistent ping of her phone shattered the stillness. A text from Jane, her mother. Claire's heart leaped and sank simultaneously, a tumultuous tide of old wounds and recent memories. Jane had vanished, leaving Claire to navigate the chaos of life alone. The text that night, however, painted a picture of need wrapped in a veneer of familiarity. "I need you, Claire." That four-word plea evoked a blend of anger and nostalgia. Why now? After a decade filled with silence, did Jane think she could reclaim her place in Claire's heart? Claire's muscles tensed as her mind raced through a litany of emotional scars, battling with the guilt that attached itself to thoughts of her mother. A guilty love tangled with resentment. A quick burst of anger sprang forth, nearly completing its job of fortifying her resolve to ignore the message. Yet, the urgency threaded through Jane's words pulled at her like a soft, almost desperate whisper for connection. Putting her ambitions aside to support her siblings and father had felt like a noble sacrifice, but the dreams of pursuing art had followed her like shadows, ever present and haunting. Claire shook her head as if to clear it of the thoughts that spiraled into an abyss of despair. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Standing in front of the mirror, Claire scrutinized her reflection. Physician's scrubs replaced with the casual familiarity of her faded jeans and an old t-shirt, the choices she had made dug deep into her spirit. Their once vibrant colors now dulled by the weight of unlivable dreams, the very dreams Jane had trampled with her departure. Anguish enveloped her, contrasting sharply with the community that rallied around wholesome potlucks and laughter over apple pie. Simple joys that felt foreign in the shadow of her complicated heart. Arriving at the lavish hotel, Claire hesitated as the grandeur washed over her, humiliation raging within. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the scent of privilege hung heavy in the air. She spotted Jane, adorned in designer clothes that screamed of a world she had long discarded, but her relaxed demeanor felt more like a mask than truth. Claire felt her heart thud painfully, the distance between them palpable, a gaping chasm of disappointment and longing. As Jane beckoned her forward, illusion shattered under the weight of reality. The frail note in her mother's voice revealing illness painted pictures of vulnerability tugging at Claire's professional distance. The fear bubbling within her, relentless, fought against the nostalgia of family, affection, and underlying resentment that seemed to electrify the very air they breathed. Would she find forgiveness in the woman who had caused so much pain, or would the moment cement their drifting hearts, leaving Claire in turmoil, a stranger in her own family? The decision clung impossibly to the brink, a precipice that teetered on the edge of discovery and heartache, drawn like a moth to flame, yet wary of the burn. Claire stepped forward, each stride heavy with a mixture of dread and anticipation. The polished marble floor felt cold beneath her feet, grounding her in a reality she wanted to escape. Jane's outstretched arms seemed less welcoming than they were, a plea for forgiveness shrouded in luxury and past mistakes. The moment their eyes locked, everything they had been to each other hung palpably in the air, a fragile thread that threatened to snap. "Claire," Jane started, her voice laced with practiced ease, yet the slight tremor betrayed the vulnerability seeping through her facade. "I'm so glad you came." The words twisted in Claire's gut, igniting an inner conflict that had been simmering for years. How could she accept gladness from a woman who had walked away without a backward glance? The walls of the hotel, adorned with glimmering chandeliers and plush furnishings, felt like a stark contrast to the gloom of the memories that haunted Claire. Here was a woman who had long chosen comfort over connection, now in desperate need of assistance, the ultimate turn of fate. As Claire settled into a chair opposite Jane, she hesitated, the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. She could sense Jane's gaze piercing through her carefully cultivated defenses, searching for traces of the daughter she presumably still knew. Could she allow herself to be vulnerable in this moment? The nurse in her, the one who had devoted herself to others and their pains, pushed back against the swell of anger. She wanted to scream about the decade of silence, to unleash the pent-up grief of having lost her mother, but she knew that would only fuel the fire of conflict. "What do you need, Jane?" Claire's voice emerged softer than intended, betraying the hard shell she had worked so hard to create. Jane's composure faltered, revealing shades of fear beneath her veneer of wealth. I've been diagnosed with something serious." The acknowledgement hung in the air, the words echoing painfully as Claire stared at her mother, desperate for any sign of the woman who had loved her or anyone who really understood her sacrifices. "And I can't face this alone." The revelation struck hard, a point midway on a tightrope of their relationship, swaying dangerously under the weight of expectations they both felt. Claire's thoughts flickered to her own neglected dreams, art projects she once yearned to pursue, canvases left bare like her emotional interfaces. The realization that her life had become intertwined with her family's struggle felt suffocating. As she reflected on her own choices, the sacrifices made in spite of personal longing felt less like burdens and more like silent cries for her to reclaim her life. "I've lost so much time," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "Now we can gain it back," Jane urged, leaning forward, her eyes swimming with desperation. "We can help each other. This is an opportunity." The invitation reverberated painfully through Claire's heart. Chance seemed so fragile, an attempt to build bridges where only chasms existed. Throughout her life, she had always been the caretaker, but maybe now, she had to decide if she could be both a daughter and someone who finally put herself first. The thought sparked an electrifying swell of determination. What was her legacy? What did she long to leave, not just as Jane's child, but as Claire? Staring into her mother's pleading eyes, Claire grappled with a choice that could lead to profound healing or deeper wounds. The stakes felt impossibly high, but perhaps that was the only way forward. "I'll help," she said finally, sealing the commitment with a breath that felt like a concession and a declaration. Now, Claire faced a new test. Could she break down the barriers of the past and open herself to the kind of love that she had long since buried? And as the weight of the choice settled upon her, another thought surfaced, a daunting possibility that this was not just about healing her mother but perhaps a journey to confront her own identity, to find the artist she had hidden. What awaited her in the pursuit? Of that understanding, she couldn't yet imagine, but one truth resonated: the time had come to face her own canvas, blank and waiting, and understand that she was capable of creating not only beauty but also the life she had always yearned for. Claire's resolve solidified, but as she left the hotel that day, the weight of the impending journey settled onto her shoulders like a burden she hadn't anticipated. Each footstep felt heavier than the last, echoing in her mind as if they were a countdown to an uncertain future. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling exposed, not just to her mother but to herself, the realization of all she had sacrificed to fill the void Jane had left. That eye and the quiet of her apartment, Claire scanned the familiar walls, the faint scent of linseed oil and turpentine still clinging to the air. It felt like a lifetime since she had picked up a brush or even dared to imagine returning to her art. The canvases, tucked away like forgotten dreams, stared back at her with accusing silence. Could she still create? Would her past artistry bleed into the present, or had she abandoned that part of herself for good? The internal monologue ignited a fire of determination, yet it was quickly tempered by creeping doubts. Could she become the artist she once aspired to be while also supporting Jane in her time of need? The duality felt overwhelming, two parts of her life tearing in opposite directions, a dilemma that forced her to confront both anger and aspiration. With a deep breath, she made a plan. She would dedicate the mornings to her art, reclaiming that lost piece of herself. It was time to fight for her dreams with or without Jane's approval. After work shifts at the hospital, when the world usually wrapped her in scrubs and stethoscopes, she would divert to the studio, immersing herself in color and form, chasing the spark she had thought extinguished. Over the following weeks, she found herself creating again. Swaths of deep crimson danced alongside softer pastels. She painted with fervor, as though the canvas absorbed her pain and transformed it into something beautiful. But amid this burgeoning renaissance, an unease simmered beneath the surface. Every stroke of the brush was carefully calculated, yet her mind whispered of the impending confrontation with Jane. The vulnerability of opening the door to both art and repair felt perilous. Visits with Jane grew more frequent, shifting from guilt-laden conversations to coexisting moments of silence, punctuated only by shared laughter over trivial matters. Yet with each casual interaction, Claire held back pieces of herself, wary of diving into conversations that tread too deeply into their fractured history. Jane remained grateful, but Claire sensed an undercurrent of expectation and unspoken assumption that everything would fall in line between them simply because Claire had offered help. After one such visit, when their discussion turned to Jane's treatment plan, statistics and prognosis draped in clinical precision, Claire felt an urgency to assert herself. It wasn't merely about providing care, it had become a necessity to reclaim her narrative. "Mom, we need to talk about how this affects us," she finally said, her voice steady and assertive. Jane's expression faltered. "I thought we were on the same page. This is about healing." "It's also about me," Claire countered, the fire of pent-up frustration flaring into the open. "I can't be your only focus if you expect me to be a daughter and an artist. I need to exist in my own right, not just as your caretaker." The silence that followed was palpable, heavy with the consequences of confrontation and the weight of their past relationship pressing down upon them. This was not just a confrontation, it was a declaration of independence, a seismic shift in their dynamic that both terrified and exhilarated Claire. As the conversation unfolded, layers of resentment peeled away, revealing vulnerabilities that had long lain dormant. By voicing her needs, she was not just nurturing herself, she was also allowing Jane to face her own fears, an invitation to truly connect rather than merely coexist. With fresh energy fueling her aspirations, Claire returned to her studio. With every brushstroke fueled by a newfound sense of freedom, she wondered not just about the art she could create but about the creation of her life. The canvas transformed into her personal battleground, where love and sacrifice intermingled, waiting to be reconciled, yet, she knew deep down that the consolidation of both her identities, the artist and the daughter, was only the beginning. How could she maintain this balance while Jane's health teetered precariously? What challenges awaited them both as they faced the truth of their relationship? With her heart pounding, Claire stood back to survey her work, a kaleidoscope of colors that felt both unsettling and potent, a reflection of the complicated duality of her life. And as the questions loomed on the horizon, the reality of a strained mother-daughter bond echoed in her ears. What would it truly take to heal them both? The weeks bled into each other, and Claire found herself enveloped in an uncomfortable rhythm of progress and introspection. Mornings were now dedicated to the solitude of her studio, where she set loose the colorful fragments of her dreams. The afternoons morphed into an almost mechanical sequence of hospital shifts. But it was the evenings, stretched between these two worlds, that challenged her resolve. Each night, her thoughts spiraled around the redefined relationship with Jane. The confrontation from the last visit replayed in Claire's mind. She had crossed a threshold, but was it enough to mend what had been frayed for years? Courage and fear mingled into a confused tension as she strained to understand the shifts that had taken place. Rather than feeling joyous, Claire felt an underlying tremor of anxiety. The profound conversations had merely scratched the surface. What lay beneath could still surface and perhaps unravel everything. As she painted, the canvas became a refuge, a mirror reflecting not only the vibrant colors of her creativity but also the shadows of her feelings. One evening, as Claire rubbed her brush against the palette, blending ochre into turquoise, her mind meandered toward a delicate moment during their last encounter. Jane's fleeting smile after Claire had voiced her needs lingered, resting heavy on her heart, but the brilliance of art could only block the gnawing worries for so long. Each stroke unveiled revelations of herself and her hopes, yet also reawakened a dread of failure. What if Jane fell back into despair? With every new creation, Claire was confronted by the haunting question of whether it would sustain her mother or bring Claire herself back to the precipice of helplessness. Determined to foster that new direction, Claire picked up the phone. She dialed her therapist's number, feeling an odd mixture of trepidation and resolve. She needed a deeper dialogue, a guide through this evolving relationship with both her mother and her own artistry. The instant connection with her therapist was reminiscent of dipping a brush into paint, senses ignited with new revelations. "Claire," her therapist began as she sat in the studio with a sketchbook in her lap, "you've stepped into a new arena of your life. But that doesn't mean you have to carry the entire weight of healing alone." The session turned into a haven where Claire outlined her fears of disappointing Jane, the anxiety of being seen solely as an artist rather than a daughter. Her therapist's insight struck chords deep within, unraveling concepts Claire had long tangled within herself. It became clear that to cultivate both her identities, she required boundaries not only for her own sake but also for her mother's growth. The realization hit with a clarity that rendered Claire breathless. Establishing boundaries did not signify abandonment. Indeed, learning to stand firm would allow Jane the space to wrestle with her own health battles independently. Claire wasn't undermining her mother, she was inviting her to reclaim parts of herself that had been eclipsed for too long. Leaving the session, a sense of empowerment washed over her. She could navigate the fraught waters of motherhood and artistry if she held on to her commitment to both realms with honesty. In that moment, she resolved to infuse this newfound understanding into her next visit with Jane. Standing in her studio the next evening, she prepared herself mentally, breathing deeply as she smoothed colors across the canvas. Art had become a sensation echoing her internal evolution, a language she could share with Jane. Maybe, just maybe, she could use this as a bridge to ease the conversations still to come. Claire turned to her easel, envisioning a looming question: would she present her art as a means to heal their relationship? With a deep breath, she grabbed the brush, promising to wield it with purpose. Knowing that the upcoming visit might tear down further walls between them, Claire felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Before she began, she glanced at the clock, the time ticking steadily toward another session with Jane. In her heart, she wondered, was she ready to confront the depths of their pain again? Could she share her art as a piece of herself, or would it become another arena of conflict? The challenge loomed, and Claire steadied herself for what could unfold next, resolute in her growth, braced for whatever they might uncover together. Claire arrived at the hospital, a gentle weight settling in her chest, a mix of anticipation and fear. As she navigated the sterile hallways, her mind whirled with thoughts of her previous conversations with Jane. Would her mother appreciate her artistic gesture? Would it warm the churning waters of their dialogue, or would it drown them in more unspoken truths? Entering Jane's room, Claire immediately sensed the tension hanging in the air. Her mother looked fragile, yet fierce, a spirit that demanded acknowledgement. The moment Jane laid eyes on Claire, a flicker of something, a blend of love and apprehension, flashed across her features. It was a look Claire had seen countless times before, yet this time felt different, laden with unspoken questions. "Hi, Mom," Claire began, her voice softer than she had intended, the weight of her purpose trembling at the edges. "Hey, Claire," Jane replied, a hint of guardedness woven into her tone. The conversation, tethered between casual niceties and deeper fears, hung in the space between them. Drawing a deep breath, Claire forged ahead, her heart racing. "I've brought something to share with you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small canvas, a piece she had created since their last visit, one that bore the infusion of her mixed emotions. "What is it?" Jane's voice edged with curiosity, though her expression remained uncertain. Claire placed the canvas on the small table beside her mother. The bold, swirling colors mirrored the fierce complexity of their relationship, vibrant yellows representing hope, deep blues for sorrow, and flashes of fiery red for the anger they both harbored. Every hue was an echo of their storied past, a visual representation of the tumult that lay beneath the surface they often skimmed. "This piece is about us. It's about our journey," Claire articulated, the tremor in her voice betraying her resolve. "I want you to see it." Jane studied the painting, her silence stretching into moments that felt like lifetimes. Claire's heart pounded with the ache of vulnerability laid bare, fearful of what her mother might say or how she might react. "It's beautiful," Jane murmured finally, but the words lacked the conviction Claire sought. "But why?" In that instant, Claire realized they stood at a precipice, a juncture where she could either cower from her own revelations or confront them head-on. The familiar fear of disappointing her mother warred with her newfound understanding of boundaries. "Because I want you to know what I feel," Claire responded, her voice steadier than before. "I'm scared. I'm scared of losing you to this illness, but I'm also trying to figure out how to support you without losing myself. I don't want to carry this burden alone." Jane's expression morphed, a clash of emotions crossing her face: recognition, sorrow, and perhaps a flicker of pride in her daughter's bravery to speak up. "Claire, you don't have to shoulder everything. I've pushed you away in my struggle, trying to protect you from my pain." This acknowledgement sparked something deep within Claire. It was a moment of reciprocity, a shared vulnerability that began to mend the long frayed strands between them. But just as her mother began to lower her defenses, Claire felt the trepidation rise again. Could they sustain this new level of honesty, or was it just another fleeting moment overshadowed by impending darkness? "Then let us share this together," Claire proposed gently, her heart racing. "Let us not just talk about the art but about how we feel. I want to hear your fears. What if we could face them as a team?" Jane's gaze locked onto Claire's, a distant storm swirling within her eyes. The beautiful chaos of the canvas had mirrored their lives, and Claire realized she had opened a door, leading into uncharted terrain. "Can we?" Jane whispered, the vulnerability laying bare the fragility they both faced. "Yes," Claire said, determination steeling her spine. "But it's going to require us both to shed the fear and let the truth in." As Jane nodded slowly, a crack began to form in the cold veneer between them. But the truth lay in if this moment could hold. Would Claire be able to sustain the weight of this new dynamic? More importantly, could her mother step through the threshold alongside her? The challenge of transformation lay ahead, and Claire steeled herself, aware that the journey forward would test the resolve they were just beginning to forge. The tension palpable in the air whispered promises of change, but also echoes of past struggles, leaving Claire questioning, was this a new beginning, or another cycle within their relentless pattern of conflict? The minutes stretched on in Jane's hospital room, silence wrapping around them like an invasive fog. Claire could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her chest, her breath hitching with the urgency of unasked questions and half-formed hopes. The canvas she had created felt like a lifebuoy tossed into turbulent waters. Would it keep them afloat or drag them under? "Claire," Jane finally said, her voice a whisper, "if we're going to face this together, I need to know how." Her eyes flickered with uncharacteristic vulnerability, an opening Claire had not anticipated. "I don't know if we can cover everything in one go," Claire admitted. "But we start with the truth. I don't want to be afraid anymore, not of you or of what is happening." The words poured out, a mix of desperation and determination. Jane's brow furrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's easier to hide behind silence, though. The quieter it is, the less pain we feel, or so I thought." A shiver raced down Claire's spine. The truth had been a silent intruder for too long, and now, it demanded attention. "But the silence feels suffocating," Claire countered, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Every time we avoid talking, I feel like I'm losing you more. It leaves me feeling powerless." "Powerless," Jane echoed, her gaze drifting to the window. Claire seized the moment, her mother's gaze a window into the depths of hidden fears. Each reflected fear pierced through Claire's growing determination, forcing her to confront her own anxiety, all the things she hadn't acknowledged. "What are you most afraid of, Mom?" Claire pressed, tuning into her mother's unspoken turmoil. It was a risk. Opening the floodgates could unleash an emotional deluge neither of them was ready for. Yet, Claire had a strange confidence now, a nascent strength budding from their raw honesty. Jane's fingers intertwined, a mindful display of nerves. "I'm terrified of being a burden, Claire. Of watching you suffer because of me. I've always wanted to be your protector, and now it feels like I'm dragging you down with me." Claire's heart ached at those words. Years spent under the illusion of her mother's invulnerability crumbled, revealing the profound fragility of Jane. The realization struck her, vulnerability could be a strength, not a weakness. No, Mom, Claire insisted, voice firm. You aren't a burden. I want to help you carry this. Each word felt like a brick in the wall they were inching toward dismantling, a testament to her burgeoning resolve. Jane's eyes glistened, yet she held firm to her emotions. It's not just about what I'm going through, Claire. It's about how this illness impacts you. It's selfish of me to open this gate when I don't know if you're ready to walk through it. I don't want to ignore this anymore, Claire shot back, energy surging. If this is a burden, let it be one we share. I can't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. A moment of tension crackled between them, Jane's hesitation palpable, before Claire took a step closer, hoping to bridge the chasm that had defined their relationship for years. Let us start small. Share a piece of what you're feeling, and I'll do the same. For the first time, Claire caught a glimpse of raw abandonment in Jane's eyes, a battle between resistance and the desire for a connection. All right, Jane relented, her voice heavy with the gravity of the moment. But it will be difficult. I'm not ready to relive some memories. I don't need you to relive everything in one breath, Claire reassured. Just a feeling, a piece of truth. And so, they began, an awkward, tentative dance wading through the silence that had lingered for so long. Each word laid down transformed into a thread, stitching together their fractured connection. Claire leaned in, focused on her mother's hardened exterior softening with each passing moment. They exchanged truths threaded with pain, regret, and glimpses of the love that had always tethered them. This process pulled at Claire's very foundation. It demanded she confront her preconceived notions of strength and vulnerability. However, doubt still loomed in the corners. Amid their catharsis, Claire wondered, as new truths surfaced, could they build a bridge strong enough to withstand the storms of their past? The shifting dynamic was a revelation, but the unresolved tensions and buried secrets challenged the fragile foundation they were constructing. Would vulnerability truly bring them closer together, or threaten to unravel their already delicate bond? As the shadows crept in around their revelations, the urgency to address the unspoken loomed larger than ever. What could stay hidden, and what would emerge to redefine their relationship as they faced the unknown together? The late afternoon sun filtered through the hospital curtains, draping the room in a warm, golden hue that felt almost surreal against the weight of their conversation. Claire's heart raced, her mind swirling with possibilities and fears about what lay ahead. Each word spoken felt like a revelation, but the enormity of the truths still to be faced loomed heavily. Can you tell me about the first time you felt like a burden? Claire asked cautiously. She wanted to push, to dig deeper, but felt the need to approach her mother's vulnerability with care. Jane inhaled sharply, a faint tremble revealing just how deep the scars ran. It was years ago when I got sick for the first time. You were so young, and I remember thinking that keeping my struggles from you was the right thing to do. But it felt like I was hiding a part of myself, a part you needed to see. Claire shifted in her seat, absorbing the reality that her mother had put on a facade for her protection. But I would have understood. As much as a kid can, Claire replied, her own thoughts sparking questions of her upbringing. You didn't have to go through that alone. I thought I was protecting you, Jane said quietly, her gaze drifting to the floor as if the weight of her past was physically pulling her down. I pushed myself to be your pillar, but perhaps it was just an act of selfishness. A chill raced through Claire's selfishness. The word rolled around in her head, intertwining with memories of moments spent waiting for Jane to return home from work, or the times she found herself perched on the edge of her bed while her mother sat in silence, lost in thought. Had those moments been acts of protection, or silent pleas for help? No, Claire asserted, her voice gaining strength. It was what you thought you needed to do to survive, but it wasn't the only way. I needed you to be real with me, Mom. In that moment, Claire felt the scales of power shift between them. No longer was Jane the invulnerable parent, she was a person grappling with the depths of her condition, just like Claire was attempting to navigate her own emotional landscape. What if I let go of that facade? Jane murmured, brushing tears from her lashes. What if being honest with you tears us apart instead of bringing us together? Claire hesitated, her mind racing at the thought of losing the newfound connection. But what if it doesn't? What if we can finally be ourselves? The challenge ahead beckoned with promise, and Claire felt her courage fortifying against the shadows that lingered. As Jane considered her daughter's words, Claire couldn't help but reflect on her own feelings. Wasn't the fear of confronting the truth equally paralyzing for her? They both stood at the edge of a precipice, teetering between vulnerability and the pull back to denial. "Let us keep sharing," Claire proposed, her voice steady. "It's a start, even if it's just a thread at a time." Jane nodded, the lines on her brow softening for the first time. As they exchanged another piece of their hearts, Claire felt her perspective broaden. This moment was not just about suffering or empathizing, it was about learning and growing together, yet the specter of unspoken fears still haunted them. As emotions flared and receded between them, Claire recognized the dual nature of their journey. The potential of revelation lingered, but so did the possibility of shattering the bond they were precariously rebuilding. They dove deeper, layer after layer, each shared truth a testament to their strength. But Claire's resolve was tested when an unexpected thought resurfaced. What if discussing the past altered Jane irreparably? Just then, the door creaked and a nurse entered, cutting through their heightened emotional landscape. She glanced between them, sensing the intensity that filled the air. "Is everything all right?" Caught off guard, Claire quickly exchanged a glance with her mother, unsure whether their strides toward transparency could withstand external pressures. It brought forth a realization: healing would require not only honesty but also the acceptance of changes that would inevitably surface. The door swung shut behind the nurse, yet the tension remained palpable. Would they unearth deeper truths, or would the fear of transformation inhibit their progress? Claire settled back in her chair, her heart racing with the duality of hope and dread, the uncharted territory stretching before them like an infinite road of revelations yet to unfold. They stood on the brink of a dramatic shift, and Claire's gut twisted with anticipation, knowing that their next words could either shatter or strengthen their bond further. How much truth can love bear? Claire pondered silently, bracing herself for the dialogue ahead. Little did she know, an unexpected visitor was about to step into their lives, threatening everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. The unexpected visitor arrived before Claire could fully process her thoughts. The sound of the door opening was jarring, jolting both her and Jane from the intimate moment they were sharing. A tall, sturdy figure stepped into the room: Claire's estranged father, Thomas. The silence hung in the air, charged with unresolved tension as he stood there, uncertain but with an unmistakable determination in his expression. Claire felt a surge of emotions scramble within her: anger, confusion, and a flicker of hope. This was the man who had ghosted her childhood, a figure who had loomed large in her mind, always painted with shades of disappointment and abandonment. Memories flooded her, birthdays spent wishing for his presence, family photos that felt incomplete without him. "What are you doing here?" Claire's voice broke the silence, sharp and piercing. She stood, bracing herself for the whirlwind of confrontation that was sure to follow. Each syllable held both her disbelief and a fragile sense of self-defense. Thomas shifted uncomfortably as he glanced at Jane, who remained seated, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I came to talk," he said, his voice gruff but barely masked by hesitance. "I know I haven't been a part of your lives, but I want to change that." "Change?" Claire echoed, feeling the weight of bitterness rise in her throat. "After all this time? You pick now to decide you want to be a father?" A flicker of pain crossed Thomas's face, but he pressed on. "I've been working on myself. A lot has happened since I left. I've realized I can't change the past, but I can be here now." His admission hung in the air, creating a rift of vulnerability that both terrified and intrigued her. Claire's mind raced, grappling with the complexities of forgiveness and the idea that her father was potentially trying to confront his own demons. Could this be a moment of redemption, or simply another disappointment waiting to happen? "You think showing up now will fix everything?" Claire's voice softened slightly, trembling between anger and uncertainty. "I need to know. Why should I believe you?" "I can't give you reason to believe me all at once," Thomas replied, his voice steadying. "But I'm willing to prove it. It starts with honesty, doesn't he it? Claire turned to look at Jane, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears. They were tangled in a web of emotional intensity, mothers and daughters entwined in heartfelt revelations now thrust into the fray with uninvited chaos. "Mom, what do you think?" Claire asked, turning back, seeking solidarity in this unexpected storm. Would her mother extend forgiveness, or would she draw another line in the sand? Jane raised her head, visibly shaken but somehow composed. "Your father is right about the need for truth," she began, each word laden with struggle. "But the truth also means acknowledging the pain he caused us, Claire. It means considering if we can invest in the possibility of repairing what was broken." Claire felt the gravity of Jane's words. The idea of moving forward was enticing yet entangled with fragility. Could vulnerability here allow for healing, or would it only expose them further? Her heart raced as she confronted the urgency of the situation. Could they reject this moment, go back to the safety of silence they had just begun to dismantle, or embrace the unknown, laying bare their emotions for a chance at reconnection? "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Claire admitted, the tremor in her voice revealing how unsteady her footing was. "Sometimes readiness isn't a choice, it's a responsibility," Thomas replied, sensing her hesitation. "Taking that responsibility is the first step toward healing for all of us." As his words lingered in the air, Claire felt the tension mount within her. She was grappling not just with her father's sudden appearance but with the emotional upheaval it threatened. Could she let her guard down and take a step toward confronting pain in search of potential forgiveness? The heavy silence that followed was filled with unsaid words and uncharted possibilities. Claire's gaze darted between her mother and father, each breathing reluctance and anticipation. All their lives had been steeped in the consequences of silence. What new burdens would honesty bring? The energy in the room shifted as they stood on the brink of discovery, a place that fostered both healing and new challenges. Claire knew a decision lay ahead, one that could redefine their relationships entirely. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her next question. "What is the truth you want to share?" And as the air thickened with anticipation, she braced herself for revelations that would unearth both their shared history and reshape their futures. Claire's breath caught in her throat, the weight of her question tapping into a reservoir of fear and hope. She had spent years constructing barriers, and now, standing before her father, those walls trembled on the brink of collapse. This moment demanded both courage and vulnerability. Thomas took a step closer, the tension in his frame palpable. "I want to share the truth about why I left," he said, his voice deeper, resonating with an unsettling gravity. "I need you to understand that it wasn't just about me walking away from you and your mother. It was about my own demons, my inability to cope with my responsibilities." Claire's heart raced, dread and anticipation merging. His heartfelt sincerity was disarming, but centuries of emotional wounds loomed like a shadow behind his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, the instinct to probe deeper pushing against the protective walls she had forged. "I struggled with my own failures. I thought distancing myself would help you, that you wouldn't have to bear the weight of my shortcomings. It was selfish and wrong," Thomas admitted, his eyes darting slightly away, as if fearing the judgment his own words might invoke. Jane's voice broke the intensity, barely louder than a whisper. "We were left with our pain, exclusively your choice. It never felt like it was for us." Her gaze was firm, steadying Claire as her mother took a stand against the swirling emotional tide. "I know," Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly under the weight of recognition. "And I regret it every single day. But I've been seeking help, working to confront the very issues that drove me away. I need you to know that I've changed. I want to be a better father, not just a specter in your life." Painful memories ricocheted through Claire's mind, a maze of days spent yearning for his presence, families gathered with laughter, and holiday cards signed only by Jane. Yet here he was, bearing his soul, a canvas of his failures painted out in raw honesty. The conflict within her raged, torn between anger and compassion. "Have you really changed?" Claire challenged, her voice steadier than she felt. "Prove it. Prove to me that you're not just another version of the man who abandoned us. I am ready to face whatever it takes, he assured her, a flicker of determination in his gaze. It starts here, today. I don't want you to take my word for it. I want to show you that I'm committed to rebuilding what I broke. And I know it won't be easy. I have to earn your trust back. Claire inhaled sharply, the challenge stirring a newfound defiance inside her. The prospect of reconciliation was daunting, but the allure of potential transformation beckoned like a fleeting glimmer in the darkness. If she embraced this, it could lead to healing, not just for her father, but for herself and Jane as well. Then tell me what you plan to do, she demanded, unwilling to settle for mere promises. What does rebuilding look like to you? Thomas paused, gauging the seriousness in her question. It means attending family counseling together, meeting regularly not just for your forgiveness, but for a chance to understand each other fully. I'll share my therapy sessions with you, my struggles. I'll commit to being present, to listening. The idea of counseling rattled in Claire's mind, both an invitation and a threat. She had never opened herself to such vulnerability, and the thought carved a deep fissure of fear in her heart. A part of her was desperate to cling to bitterness, to shield her heart from further anguish, while another wanted to leap toward this potential new beginning. Turning to Jane, she found her mother's eyes glistening with a mix of uncertainty and cautious optimism. What do you think? Claire whispered, grappling with the weight of her next move. Jane's gentle nod ignited a spark of resolve within Claire. I think it's worth exploring, Jane said quietly, her voice softer but firm. We deserve to understand what this could be. Steeling herself, Claire faced Thomas. Okay, I'm willing to try. But it has to start at your level, no more distancing or excuses. I need to see you fully engaged. Absolutely, he agreed, a hint of relief crossing his features. As they made eye contact, Claire felt a tenuous thread of connection weaving itself through the fissures of their fractured family dynamics. They were standing on a precipice, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Just remember, she added, it's a commitment for all of us. I won't accept anything less. The room was thick with a mix of hope and wariness, and as they moved toward a future shrouded in uncertainty, Claire realized that this was only the beginning of their journey together. And in that realization, something shifted within her. This confrontation, though perilous, also began to reshape her understanding of forgiveness, showing her that true transformation demanded facing the shadows of their past. As she turned to her father, a newfound strength ignited within her, and a question slipped past her lips. What's the first step we take together? Before she could process the response, Claire felt a wave of anticipation wash over her, unaware that in choosing to embrace confrontation, she had unwittingly set off a series of events leading to a truth her family had long buried. Claire stood in the center of her studio, overwhelmed yet invigorated by the tumult of emotions swirling around her. The canvas before her was more than just a collection of colors, it embodied the journey of her life, a vivid collage of struggles, heartbreak, healing, and hope. Each stroke was a testament to her resilience, an act of defiance against the silence that had long shackled her spirit. Reflecting on her recent encounters, Claire felt the restoration of a long-buried passion for art spreading within her. After years trapped under the weight of obligation, the act of painting became her sanctuary. It was not merely a pastime, but a profound declaration of independence. She had embraced the artist in herself while simultaneously facing her familial challenges. The conversations with Jane and Thomas, their candid disclosures, marked a pivotal change. She realized their interactions were not about rekindling the past, they were avenues for liberation. Every heartfelt word exchanged stripped away layers of resentment. Their family's painful history finally had a voice, and Claire felt the chains begin to loosen around her heart. In the subsequent weeks, Claire dedicated herself to long mornings of painting and evenings of providing care for Jane. Each session with her mother emphasized mutual honesty and support. They reshaped their relationship into a space where vulnerability became a strength rather than a liability. Jane's acknowledgement of her past mistakes was met with Claire's newfound ability to express her own fears, weaving them together into a narrative of healing. The thrill of personal expression resonated in Claire's work, renewing a drive she believed had vanished. Each painting became a cathartic exploration of her identity, skillfully merging her roles of daughter and artist. Claire delighted in the contrast of light and shadow, the complexities reflecting the dualities of their family's dynamics. Days turned into months, and Claire's art began to gain attention. Her work was selected for a local exhibition, where pieces depicting her journey hung side by side with others from various artists. In that moment, Claire stood among the vibrant colors and exposed emotions, feeling a sense of accomplishment and recognition flooding her heart. As she mingled with visitors, Claire was approached by a gallery owner who expressed admiration for her pieces. "You have a unique perspective on vulnerability and transformation. Your art speaks volumes," he remarked. Those words ignited a pride within her, consolidating the understanding that she hadn't just found her voice, she had also cultivated her own narrative. Standing in her booth amidst enthusiasts, Claire looked back at the tumultuous landscape of her life and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had conquered her fears, faced the realities of her family, and acknowledged her aspirations. The emotional labor of rebuilding relationships with Jane and Thomas had synthesized with her artistic rebirth, intertwining into a fulfilling new chapter. Perhaps the most radiant achievement was the realization that she wasn't leveraging her art just as escape, but as a foundation for reconciliation with herself and her family. By embodying her experiences, Claire was no longer defined solely as Jane's daughter nor merely an artist. She was Claire, a woman with her own dreams, desires, and strengths. As she left the gallery that night, the proud smile illuminating her face revealed a person transformed. The journey of acceptance and assertion had taught her that personal fulfillment comes not from diminishing her needs for others but embracing both her roles with sincerity. The storm had passed, leaving a sense of clarity and drive coursing through her veins, a promise of continued growth, undeterred by fears that once cast a shadow. Claire had achieved closure with her past, and armed with that realization, she was now ready to face whatever came next, not just as a caretaker, but as a vibrant creator of her own destiny. Embrace your journey of transformation. Don't wait even one more second to subscribe immediately to the channel for more exclusive emotional stories. You need to leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Claire's journey. And share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this message of personal growth and achievement.